So we'll jump right into it by starting off with the cut list and the parts list. Everything on here is what you'll need to make this sifter with an old reciprocating saw. So I'll get into cutting these pieces, and whenever you buy wood, you'll usually have this little tab on the end with the staple in it. So I usually always just cut it off, and you always want to cut it off to make sure you got a square end to start with. So our first piece, a couple pieces will be 36 inches. So we measure out 36. And get cutting. Next, we're going to want to measure out 2 inches by 2 inches out of these corners on each one. And this is going to be our notch that will stick out on the wheelbarrow, so it fits on the top of a wheelbarrow. We'll just take our square and square them up. And then we'll just cut them out with the jigsaw. Next up, we're going to want to drill pocket holes, 3 of them into here, and I just take my pocket hole jig and I glued it onto a clamp. So whenever I flush up the end of the jig right here to the board, I clamp it on, and all I got to do is just drill into it. Okay, so then we're going to start assembling the main frame. These are the pocket screws that I put on the list. They got a square head on them, 1.25 inches, and they have this little channel cut out on them so that whenever they go in, the wood won't split. I'll show you how easy it is. Usually I just get them started just a tiny bit. So whenever we put them up on here, the notches that we cut out are going to be the bottom. I usually put them to the inside. One here, one here. So it's going to go in here right like this. We can stand it up for now though. So now the back side is going to be flush with this notch. Flush and as square as you can get. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not building a house or nothing or cabinets, but and actually it's better if you have an extension on here. I'll go grab one. So it is best if you got the one piece that's long, but this is all I got, so this is what I'm gonna work with, I guess. It'll do. And same to this side. Okay, so that's what we're left with there. Okay, now we're gonna start building the inner box that's gonna hold the screen and have the wheels and ride within. So the two longer pieces are gonna be the outside, and then the two shorter pieces are gonna be in here. So these pieces are the pieces that I'm gonna put the pocket holes in. Same concept. Drill the pocket holes, 3 of them at a time. Okay, and then kind of the same concept, except for we're just making a square box. So this is going to be the inner box that sits inside of this box, and then we'll put the wheels and raise it up, and then this is what's going to shake back and forth. So now the next step is to put these wheels in here. So next we're going to mark our holes to where we want our wheels to go. And from the top, if this is sitting in here like this, mark it 2 inches from the edge and 1 inch down. One inch down from the top, 2 inches in from the edge. Then we'll just take an awl, punch them. Then we'll take a 1/4 inch drill bit, the same size as our bolts that we're going to put in. The carriage, why do you like to use the carriage bolts with this little head on them, flat head there? Because as they sit inside, it'll be less to get in the way. And we'll just drill these out. Again, we're not making cabinets or anything or an epoxy table. And whenever you flip this over, make sure that the top is the top. So you're not putting 2 holes on this side and then 2 holes on this side, or vice versa. You know, you want the holes on the same side, obviously. And then we're gonna put our bolts through this way from the inside out. Sometimes you may have to pound them in. Make sure to hit a like if you like the little hammer. And then we'll just put our washers on. Washer on each, and then the regular nut. And then we're going to want to cinch that down good with a wrench. You can have the washer set into the wood a little bit. Just tight enough that with all the vibration it's not going to go anywhere. And you want it at least tight enough to where it's pulling the bolt in on this side. See how that bolt's flush now? Then it's not in the way whenever we put our screen in later, if you use the screen. We can put our wheels on. So these wheels, like I said, are a 2-inch wheel, the 3/8 hole. So the 3/8 hole will fit onto the 1/4 inch bolt. And then I believe it was a 2.5 inch bolt. So So you just got a little bit left. That's enough to hold on the nylock. But see, the nylock isn't on all the way. See how it's not in there all the way? So then we're actually gonna tighten down those bolts and pull them through a little more so that we get some more threads on. Because you want those nylocks to be able to hit the nylon on the tip. And that's what actually locks it in there. Now we should have plenty. Then back it off just enough so that the wheel starts spinning. We don't need it to spin so freely, but so now see how that bolt's in the nylon in there? Now it's locked on there. And the bolt won't come off. There we have it. So now our carriage will ride on top of the main frame. Next we'll put some screen on the bottom. I'll show you how to do that. So then next we're going to want to cut out a piece of 1/4 inch hardware cloth as big as our inner basket is. This one, don't mind the edges because I tore it off another one that I wasn't using anymore. But you want to make sure that you gotta, it's nicer to have a bigger piece and then trim it afterwards, because then you can stick a screwdriver in it, pull it tight, and then staple it down. And then we're just going to take the stapler and go around and staple it. Then my stapler is about as old as I am, so it doesn't want to put them in all the way, so I'm just going to hammer them flat. And you can use an air stapler, just be careful because the air stapler is pushing so far that it'll actually cut through. That's why a lot of these are cut through, because I peeled it off the other one. So then there we have our basic sifter. And if you don't want to put the reciprocating saw on it, you can put it on your wheelbarrow and use it like this if you want to get sore arms and stuff, but after about 2-3 shovelfuls you'll be tired. So next we got to figure out how to mount this onto here. And we're going to cut a slot in here, drill a hole with the nail, cut off a blade. Whenever I was messing around with this last night, a little piece popped off and the little pin that slips in here to keep the blade. These blades go in here, slide in there, and then where the hole is, there's a little pin that'll go in that hole and keep the blade from falling out. Well, anyways, that thing popped off and I probably spent 20 minutes looking for it last night and I kind of gave up. So now I'm just going to try and weld the blade in there, and then it can just stay in there forever. But I'll see what I can do and then I'll get back to you. Okay, that actually worked out all right. I don't know if you can see in there, but I got it welded on there. I'm pretty sure it's not going nowhere. If it breaks off, whatever, I'll just weld another one in there. But so now, this is going to sit here. Depending on what sawzall you have, I mean, it's kind of like a, you got to use your own ingenuity. But where this flat piece is, I'm just buttoning it up against here. It is rounded on here a little bit before it goes flat. But I want this about in the center. Like I said, again, we're not building cabinets or nothing, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but kind of mark where you want your hole to be. And then, actually, I think this is kind of rocky, I'll take and mark that out, and then I'll take a grinder and I'm gonna grind a little bit off of here, a little divot in here, so that this rounded piece can sit down in there. And yes, I know grinders aren't made for wood, but I'm a gardener, not a welder, so it's okay. So now that it doesn't rock in there, this is where we're gonna put our piece of pipe strapping to hold it here. But we just wanted to be able to find the height somewhat level. I know it's just resting on here, but we're gonna take those other 3 pieces of wood and build a little thing where this handle's gonna sit on, and then we'll put a block of wood, trace this out. The block of wood will sit in there, and that's what's gonna hold it. But for now, just to get this, you can kind of tell if it rocks or not. Try and keep it as flat as it can, and then just mark on here where you want your line to be. And then that's where we're going to take the multi-tool and cut a notch in it. And there we have our little slit in there. And then we'll try and figure out centered wise, after it's in there, where we want our hole to be. Because then we want our hole in there first, and then all this is lined up. Strap it down so whenever you put it in there, it'll line up and you drop the nail through. So we got a 5/32 drill bit. And then we're just gonna drill our hole far down as we can. Straight down. Then hopefully our nail fits in there without too much friction. It's kind of a little tight. I'm gonna get a little bit bigger drill bit. Okay, so we're gonna drill it all a little bit bigger. You wanna go all the way down, but you don't want it to be longer than your nail. Because after your nail's in there, you want your nail to sit up a little bit. So you're not always trying to grab it, you know what I mean? But that's kind of nice, now it fits in there just like that. So then we'll put our sawzall in there. Maybe we should have made our slot a little bigger too. Actually, let's run our slot a little bigger too. There, now that's a lot easier to find the hole quicker, if you know what I mean. So now we'll put our nail in there. So now it's in there centered in. And then this is where we're gonna put the banding on here next, just to keep it all in line. Because it'll be easier to keep this in line, keep the nail in line, screw this down, and then we can build this back here. However, you do want to keep it straight in line if it's not kinked or anything like that. That's why you want to try and keep it in the center. It doesn't matter the gap over here, but you want at least a little bit of gap so that it's not crooked, kinked and stuff. So whenever you strap it down, it'll make more sense whenever we put in the board back here and we notch this block out where it's gonna sit. But we'll get this strapped down, and then we'll start building the bracing on that. Okay, so I was calling it pipe strapping, but it's just called metal hanger strap. I'm sure people have seen this stuff before, but I don't know, something like a 10-inch piece somewhere around in here. I'll just cut it with the tin snips. Then I'm gonna cut the corners off. And then we're gonna take it and put it on here. So like I said, kind of have it centered up in here, push it all the way to one side, and then kind of pull it over about halfway to the gap. Yeah, I don't know, maybe we could have put that groove a little more. I don't know if this is so much to the center this way, I didn't measure. Yeah, it'll be fine. Make sure this is pushed all the way to the front. Push it down in here. I like to have a smaller hole at the base of the angle so that it holds it tighter. I don't know if these screws might pop through the bigger holes. We'll just screw it in. And same thing on the other side. Try and make it as tight as you can. The tighter it is, the better it's gonna hold. We'll try it on this big one, see how it holds. It's pretty sturdy enough. And then the next step will be to start building the bracing off the back to hold the handle. So the cross member board that's going to go under here should be exactly the length of the main frame from edge to edge, because our boards are going to go on the outside of each, and then this board's going to be in the middle. So I know this one's going to need some pocket holes in the inside of each, so I'll get to that. So 15 inches from the end of here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I'm just gonna get a couple screws started in here. I'll put 5 screws in each side, but so where we made our 15-inch mark here, we want the end of this to be flush with that. And then whenever we bring this up, we want the nut. I ran it out and the backstroke stops here. So this is the farthest back it's gonna be, because this is gonna be up a little bit. Because we gotta bring it up to get the board that's gonna sit under here. But anyways, you don't want it too high, otherwise it'll run on this and this will jump around all over the place. 15-inch mark in here. Lift it up to here. Somewhere in there. And we'll throw a clamp on it. Then we'll screw it in. And if you're using 1x4s, you should be able to get 1.25" screws, and they shouldn't. As long as you don't drill them in too deep on here past the flush part, they won't stick out this side. And then we'll just do the same thing on the other side. So all we got to do is put the board on the bottom in here, and it'll be easier to have the pocket screw sides if you are doing pocket screws in the bottom, and do it from the bottom, because it's going to go on the bottom like this, and then that way stuff won't be in the way whenever you got to try and put your impact in there. So I'll just flip it over. And then we'll get to screwing this piece on. Alright, so then we got that piece on there. Now our next step is going to be to cut out a block of wood. That'll fit in here. Okay, so I got my piece of 2x4. I'm just going to stick it in here, so that we'll kind of get a rough area to trace out. Kind of have to guess in here. Try not to get too much in this trigger area, because that's where our mechanism is going to go to draw our speed. So we'll take this over to the bandsaw and cut that out. Okay, so now we're just going to cut this out with the bandsaw. I know it's a little tight over here, the lighting probably sucks, but hopefully my shop teacher don't ever see this. Alright, we might have to take a rasp and kind of loosen up the edges. We'll see how it fits though. Okay, so that actually fits in there really nice. So then we're gonna get this all back in here. This all back together. And like I said, we'll have a little bit of play. If you're watching between the wheel here, but not much play at all. It's not like we got much wiggle room anyways. And we're gonna get a couple more screws and then screw it on through the back. But actually, so I built one of these before, and this is what I used as the trigger. So as this spins, this is a washer on the head of a bolt, but it's off center, so the one side has a bigger gap than the other. So I want this in there, but I'm gonna have to see how it's not flat on there. Well, it sits up like that. I'm gonna have to dig this out, chisel it away and whatnot, and screw this on there, and then this will be our lever for turning it on and whatnot. We're gonna chisel that out in there. Like I said before, we're not making cabinets, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but we just gotta have it enough to where that piece will fit down in there. We'll actually grab this piece. I'll do a little more. There, so now that sits in there nice and flat. So see how that fits in there now? Sits flat on there because we're gonna screw it in here. And this will be our trigger mechanism. We'll get it spaced out even in there. And we'll screw that piece on from the back. So then, like I said, we don't have much wiggle room in here anyways with which side, so just kind of somewhere in the middle, up far enough. And then we're gonna kind of just guesstimate where that block of wood is, and we'll drill some screws in there. Then now that we got that piece in there, now we should be able to put our trigger mechanism on there. So I'm sorry I didn't make this on camera, but like I said, all it is a bolt. This nylock washer is welded onto this bar. This bar was actually the piece that was up on here, that was bolted on here, that held the fence for the saw. But it's a bolt that heads on that side with a washer off center, and then I just welded another washer on top with this bar. Sorry, still zoomed in, but then I'll show you how it works. Should work now, and then hopefully it works. So you're gonna have to push it this way, I guess, but then we're golden. Put it on a wheelbarrow and go get some compost.